Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and I thought we could talk a little bit about Thor Love and Thunder and those post-credit scenes. Well, one thing that leaves fans pretty interested after most Marvel movies is those post-credit scenes, and Thor Love and Thunder did not disappoint. Both of them were pretty big reveals and gave us clues to the future of the MCU and the Thor franchise. But obviously, if you haven't seen the movie yet, this is spoiler heavy. I want to go ahead and drop the warning now because I don't want to ruin your experience at the movie. If you haven't seen it yet, pause the video, go see it, then come back and watch it. Don't let me ruin that experience for you. Now, Thor Love and Thunder actually had two post-credit scenes, one at the mid-credit point and one at the end. So let's dive into them individually. In the film, Thor came into conflict with Zeus in the Omnipotent City, and it actually appeared Thor had killed Zeus during the process. But, Zeus is Zeus, and he didn't die. In the post-credit scene, you see Zeus pontificating about how the people of Earth no longer worship the gods and worship superheroes. And it's revealed he's talking to none other than Hercules. Now, Hercules has been a staple of Marvel Comics for decades, and a big part of the Avengers. He's often a rival to Thor, and clearly that's what Zeus was setting up here. I think this is a pretty big seed for an upcoming Thor sequel, and quite honestly, seeing Thor square off with Hercules is a pretty big deal. Now, as far as Hercules goes, we only got to see him for a second, but he was portrayed by Ted Lasso's Brett Goldstein. Clearly, this was an unexpected casting, and typically he's in comedy material, but I do think he looked pretty great in the Hercules costume, although I do think he's probably going to need to bulk up a little bit. We're going to do a full history video on Hercules shortly on the channel, so stay tuned for that. If it's been released, it's linked down below, so make sure you check that out. Now, the second post-credit scene I actually think has massive implications for the future of the Asgardian. Now, in the movie, Jane Foster does eventually pass away after succumbing to her cancer. This very much parallels the Jason Aaron comic. But in the post-credit scene, we see Jane again. She actually reappears in an area that looks very much like Asgard, and is greeted by none other than Heimdall. She has made it to Valhalla, and you actually see Heimdall point to the halls of Valhalla at the top of the hill, and quite honestly, it was a beautiful scene. Now, this suggests to me a couple things for the future of the franchise. If you're familiar with Thor in the comics, they did go through a Ragnarok where most of the gods died, but eventually they were nearly all brought back. This was the new Asgard story in the comics, which differs a lot from the MCU, but I actually think this was the first seeds in seeing some of these, if not all of these dead characters return to the MCU. I also don't think we've seen the last of Jane Foster. In the comics, after she passes away, she does return as the new Valkyrie, and I've really felt all along this is exactly where Marvel is going with this character, but it might be a slow pace. Personally, I would love to see the rest of the Asgardians return to the MCU, and it would allow them to do somewhat of a soft reboot of the Asgardians overall. Clearly, Marvel's take on how deities and gods work in the Marvel Universe has changed since Thor was first launched, and doing a soft reboot of the Asgardians right now would really help align all these pieces and could be a pretty cool thing. This would not only allow them to bring characters like Heimdall, Freya, or Odin back to life, but introduce some classic Asgardians we never saw in the Thor franchise before, like Tyr or Balder. It's a pretty exciting concept, and I really do look forward to seeing what Marvel does here. Now, there were a lot of other cameos and Easter eggs throughout the film that I want to encourage you to go check out. We'll try to do a couple other videos on those, but none of them were quite as important as these two post-credit scenes. I am curious about the future of both Hercules and Jane Foster in the MCU, so we've got something exciting to look forward to, and since we know Thor will return, the credits said so, we're obviously going to get an answer to these questions, it's just about when. So, what did you guys think? How did you feel about Hercules finally being introduced into the MCU in that post-credit scene? And do you think Jane Foster making it to Valhalla signals the possibility of many of these gods being reborn? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you hit like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates. Peace.